So I'm going to talk about how I've been using student reflections in my first year engineering class. I've been using standard-based grading in this class. This year it's 5 years, and so I started looking at using reflections a year ago because one of my concerns was that students weren't actually digging into their feedback, which we deliver through Blackboard rubrics, and really processing how each of the learning objectives was really being assessed on a given assignment, and that might be a problem set or it might be a project piece. And so I was just trying to understand, well, what information are they getting from their feedback, and what are they doing with that? And so I'm going to talk about what I did a year ago, and then I'm going to talk about what I did now. And so one of our challenges is when we're using standards-based grading is how familiar are students really with this system. We have a notion that some of them are familiar with it from K-12 because this is a system that K-12 uses, but I think that varies a lot. And for me at my institution, I do have a lot of international students, and I don't know what their experience is with standards-based grading. But if they're not familiar with it, they might not realize that they do need to review their feedback. And if they're not reviewing it, or they are seeing it, but they really don't know how to interpret it, that can be an issue. And then the third issue is if they're not reviewing it, or they can't interpret it, and then they're not acting on it, or they're just not acting on it, even if they are looking at it, then these are kind of compounding issues for the student. And it kind of makes the whole point of standards-based grading kind of, well, it goes away, right? Because they're not acting on the feedback that they're getting, therefore they're not improving on the learning objectives that they are struggling with. So if all of that's happening, then we get a lot of frustration at the faculty level because it takes work to get this up and going. And if we're not seeing the student actually paying attention to their feedback and acting on it, then we're kind of like, okay, why did we do this? And so we really need to get students to be looking at their feedback and making some action plans out of it. So my first year, the questions I was asking were through weekly prompts, and so the students answered these questions through a Blackboard survey. And so once a week, when a problem set was coming back, I would be asking about what did you think you had learned, and what did you think you had not learned, and how well do you think our evaluation was representing that work? So when you're looking at your standards-based grade feedback, is that a representation of how you thought things were going? And then what action plans do you plan to take based on that feedback? So those are the 3 prompts I was using. And overall, what I was seeing as I was reading through their reflections was, at best, they would be identifying topics that they did not learn. And for me, the topics of this class are MATLAB computer programming focused primarily, although we do some other data representation things like linear regression in this course. But they point to a topic. They were not pointing to a learning objective that they were struggling with. And so they were never drilling down to a level where they were identifying what part of this topic are you having trouble with, and specifically how's that tied to a learning objective that we have listed. And then they really struggled then to come up with an action plan that was specific to any learning objective. They would be things like, I need to work harder. I need to go to office hours. Maybe I should talk to my teammates or someone else. But they were never truly tied to, okay, I don't know how to plot. Okay, what about plotting don't you understand? And what resources do you have to really focus on these things and help yourself improve? They just really were never devising an action plan like that, which I think ties very nicely to what Sarah was saying about professional habits. If you were trying to instill in your students a professional habit, professionals get asked quarterly, semi-annually, what do you need to work on? And if you can't state that specifically, that there's a problem in your performance review. So it does tie to that ability. And that's kind of what I was saying, is they really couldn't articulate an action plan that was actually clear tasks that they could work on. So we had some other implementation issues that were kind of affecting these reflections and how poor they were. Part of it was we have a very long lag time between the problem set submission, PS standing for problem set here, and the actual feedback. I have over 1,600 students in this class, and by the time we get through a cycle of grading, a week has passed. So it's often difficult for students to actually recall what they learned 2 problem sets ago by the time they get back to a reflection. The students also really didn't understand how to do reflection and what the expectations were for reflection and how specific they should be. And so that kind of minimized the potential that reflection could have had in helping them think through plans. So this year, I've changed how I'm doing the reflections to help them drill down a little bit better with some new prompts. So this year, I have a couple of different prompts. So as the first class of every week, before class even starts, they have a problem set due. And they're also they've already had a day or two since they got their problem set feedback from the previous problems. The first thing we ask them about is, have they looked at the feedback from the previous problem set? Because there's at least 2 days that they've had to do that. And so if they've done that, what I'm asking them to do is think about, what have you already done to improve since you read your feedback? And what things do you still need to do? So those are some open-ended questions. Then for the problem set that they just submitted that is now in our grading process, I asked them to run through every single learning objective that was on that problem set. And we have a lot of tiny ones because of the nature of this class. We asked them to rate each learning objective and how they're feeling about whether they can do that learning objective, demonstrate that learning objective. And so I asked, their choices there are, I can demonstrate this without referring to any resources. I can do it on my own, essentially. Second one is, I can do that if I have access to resources. So I need a little help, essentially. I just generally need more practice at this. I need someone to actually work with me to understand how to do this. And I have no idea what this learning objective even means, which is an indicator to me that they did not even read what the learning objective means, which we have a separate document for that with every problem set. And then the last question, again, is an open-ended question of, okay, you've just evaluated all those learning objectives. What do you need to do over the next week to really work on these? And so we're trying then to keep reminding them every class that what they're doing in these open-ended questions is really focus on the learning objective that they're struggling with, and to really make specific plans, whether that's, go to a particular online module, review the lecture notes around that topic. We have some extra activities that are just for practice, that they try any variety of those extra practice things, but that they start to try to really develop an action plan that's task oriented. And so, I'll take questions.
Heidi, thank you. A couple questions came up. I posted them to you. One, Adam asked, are any of these reflections being included in their overall grade? So how are you getting them to respond? And then my question was, Trevor asked the same, so thanks, Trevor. With these, have you done any specific interventions that kind of force them to increase their response or action based on the feedback that they get?
So to the first question, there are 10 different instructors for this course, and we are each given X number of points that we can use for extra credit. And so at this point, these reflections are a bit experimental in my section, and I have 2 other faculty members who are doing these reflections with me. And we decided to use our extra credit points this way. So we figure over the course of the semester, there will be probably 13 of these kinds of reflections. And so they get points, extra credit points for doing them. Very few of my students don't do them. At least we're in week 6 now, and it's pretty steady. I mean, they want those extra credit points, so it's a nice carrot. I do grade them because if all they do is answer the multiple choice questions, that does not fly with me. And we have conversations about that they actually have to think about the open-ended questions, because that's truly the reflection part. As to trying to get them to write better, I am giving them some written feedback about their reflections if I think that they're not particularly thoughtful. I do give a little bit of feedback on them. I am still trying to figure out how to sort through their reflections and link them to their performance to try to figure out whether they are planning productive things. I can't tell whether they're doing those things that they're saying that they need to do, other than to see whether performance is improving. But right now I'm a little overwhelmed with data coming in from various things that I'm trying to do with standards-based grading in the course right now. So I haven't quite figured out what the link is between what their reflections are and what's happening with individual students.